We begin today with the president's frustration over immigration. With arrests at the Mexican border at the highest level of his presidency, Mr. Trump is looking for someone to blame, and we're going to dig into that with my panel. But first, let me set the stage. Remember when he was elected, the president said he would, quote, bring back our borders and fix immigration. But 16 months later, his call for lawmakers to fix DACA, it's gone nowhere. He did not get the money he wanted for the border wall, and his administration is now being sued by migrants caught trying to come into the U.S. So last night, the president used part of his speech in Indiana to vent that frustration.
We have the worst immigration laws in the history of mankind. We don't fight and spend no money to build our borders. Figure that one out.
Mr. Trump, call Mexico. Aren't they the ones you said we're going to pay for the wall? He also accused the Democrats of blocking immigration reform. But behind closed doors, the president's been accusing someone else, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. The two have apparently been at odds for weeks, but things reportedly came to a head Wednesday when the president lashed out at his cabinet and Nielsen specifically after finding out April detentions at the Mexican border were triple what they were a year ago. According to the Washington Post, quote, the blow-up lasted more than 30 minutes, according to a person with knowledge of what transpired. As Trump's face reddened and he raised his voice, Trump's tirade went on so long that many present began fidgeting in their seats and flashing grimaces, according to White House aides. The New York Times says Nielsen was so upset she drafted a letter of resignation. NBC News has not confirmed that. Meanwhile, DHS is pushing back, insisting Nielsen was not close to resigning, and when Nielsen herself has not denied the accounts of that meeting, she did release a statement saying, quote, the president is rightly frustrated that existing loopholes and lack of congressional action have prevented this administration from fully securing the border and protecting the American people. I share his frustration. While she may share his frustration in that sentiment, it does not mean it is appropriate to berate your top staff. I want to bring my panel in. Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com, and Ron Insana, who is a CNBC contributor and who I only berate off air. Jason, does the president have a right to be frustrated, or did he have unrealistic expectations of what Congress could achieve, or is he asking Congress to achieve things that won't solve what he wants to?
Or D, did he not understand what Congress could actually do?
I didn't for a D. Oh,
I'm being berated.
So
I'm being berated already.
I'm so sorry.
Where's my resignation letter?
Mine's already written and not submitted.
I was going to email it in. Yeah, see, that's the problem. Like, the president had unrealistic expectations. He doesn't really know how government works, right? So he's going to abuse people on a regular basis. But here's what really gets me about this. Above and beyond the fact that even Republicans who control so many branches of government can't seem to come up with a coherent plan about immigration, these sort of sob stories about people in the administration, it's so hard working for Trump and I want to quit. I'm not moved. Jeff Sessions did the same thing. If you don't like it, you can leave, right? But they're staying because they either agree with what the president's goals are and are willing to tolerate his behavior, or they think in some shape, way, or form it's going to help them professionally. So, you know, it's a mistake that he had sort of naive expectations, but these people are signing up for this.
They're signing up for it. Is it fair that he's making Kirstjen Nielsen the scapegoat, or is the broader issue that the president promised things on the campaign trail that it's unrealistic or he's unable to solve? Mexico's going to pay for the wall. Obamacare sucks. I'm going to give you something better. TPP is raping the American people. China's a currency manipulator. He said lots of things,
which are true, by the
but he
way,
said
right?
lots of things to the American people who said, right on, I want things to be better, and he hasn't offered any real solutions. So Kirstjen Nielsen, doing the job she can, is she the scapegoat?
Well, she is a scapegoat, but she's a scapegoat for a problem that doesn't exist. We do not have an immigration crisis in the United States.
Ringo dingo.
Since 2009, a million Mexicans have left the United States. The people who are trying to come in are leaving Honduras and other Latin American countries where they're trying to get political asylum in the United States. Add to that, Stephanie, we have a labor shortage in the United States. There are 6.6 million open jobs. There are 6.1 million unemployed people. We have more available jobs than we have workers.
Farmers in California
are
need
letting
these
their
workers.
fields go idle. You are not seeing Americans sending their kids out into strawberry fields in the Central Valley of California to do the harvest.
Trump needs them at his vineyard.
And at their hotels.
At their hotel. Jason, the president is adopting this zero-tolerance policy. He's even splitting up families as deterrent to people who are crossing the border illegally. And I want to share what Chief of Staff John Kelly said, because John Kelly does have those he himself has a very aggressive stance on immigration. He's not necessarily a policy guy, but on this one, he's got a lot of views.
The vast majority of the people that move illegally into the United States are not bad people. They're not criminals. They're not MS-13. But they're also not people that would easily assimilate into the United States. They're overwhelmingly rural people. In the countries they come from, 4th, 5th, 6th grade educations are kind of the norm. They're coming here for a reason, and I sympathize with the reason. But the laws are the laws.
Okay, but here's the thing. We have a lot of jobs in the United States that need to get filled that Americans who have secondary educations don't want to fill.
Yeah, in Maryland right now, they are literally having trouble bringing in the crabs. Like, the fishermen can't bring in enough crabs and have them picked through because all of these visas have been denied, and they don't have sort of migrant workers who would come in this time of season and do this kind of work. But this is look, it's just racial scapegoating, because suddenly we're talking about these people.
But is it racial scape? I mean, before we jump to that level, is it really racial scapegoating? Like, is there somewhere in the middle before someone says you're being an alarmist and you're making this racial scapegoating, before we go to a term that aggressive, give me the path.
The path is this. That's always who we brought to this country. We've always brought people who were uneducated and poor who wanted to work. That's why you came to America from Italy. That's why you came from Germany. That's why you came from all the different places that make America a great country.
As bakers, as paper delivery people, we have the life expectancy of people is growing longer and longer. Home health care is one of the growing industries, and that's often ones where you don't need registered nurses. People need companions.
And we have a shortage of nurses, by the way.
And we have a shortage of nurses.
Listen, my paternal grandmother came here in the early 1900s. She did not finish 2nd grade. She never learned to read and write. She would not have qualified by today's standards as someone who should have come to the United States. The flip side, my maternal grandfather started an Italian language newspaper in the United States, and again would not have qualified because that's an anti-assimilation type thing, right? It's like creating something that does not promote English as a primary language. Very well-educated man, served in World War I at a time when it was not popular for Italians to do so. So these kind of floating criteria for what constitutes a good prospect to become an American citizen, completely arbitrary. It's a conversation we've been having since 1840 about the Irish, about Italians, about Germans, about Jews, about Eastern Europeans. You can find this in any literature that you want. The arguments have been exactly the same. They've all been wrong. Does not affect wages. It adds to the economy, does not subtract. It's a specious argument across the board, and it just continues on, even despite all the evidence in the face of these untruths, if you will.
All right, I want to talk about another military hero, the latest developments surrounding Senator John McCain. Remarks from a White House aide are getting a furious reaction from McCain's fellow Republicans and any human being who supports common decency, prompting damage control inside the West Wing. Yet I haven't heard an apology. NBC's Peter Alexander is live at the White House. Peter, explain to me what happened here, because my mind is blown that we have not heard from Chief of Staff John Kelly in a full-throated apology.
Well, so let's walk you through this. The White House not denying this report that one of its staffers mocked Senator McCain, who, as you know, is battling brain cancer right now, in a meeting that took place here yesterday. Here's specifically how this played out. 3 sources with direct knowledge tell NBC News that this White House staffer, a special assistant by the name of Kelly Sadler, said he's dying anyway, referring to McCain. The White House not again denying this incident, instead releasing what was a brief statement that reads, "We respect Senator McCain's service to our nation, and he and his family are in our prayers during this difficult time." But you can imagine the family of John McCain is not happy about this. McCain's wife, Cindy, firing back at the aide on Twitter. She wrote, "May I remind you, my husband has a family, 7 children, and 5 grandchildren." The Hill is reporting that Sadler called Meghan McCain, she is Senator McCain's daughter, to apologize. We haven't independently confirmed that. This obviously is an uncomfortable controversy. It comes after McCain, obviously a former POW, announced his opposition for the president's CIA nominee, Gina Haspel, who faced her own tough questions for her role in the controversial interrogation tactics after 9/11 this week. And it's the latest in what really has become, Stephanie, a bitter back and forth between these two men. Earlier this week, sources telling NBC News that Senator McCain is adamant that he does not want President Trump at his funeral, requesting that the Vice President, Mike Pence, come instead. Steph?
let there be a bitter back and forth in terms of politics and policy. But if common decency and respect is not at the core of who's leading this country, then we're nothing. I want to bring back my panel. Jason and Ron, first, let's just talk about the leaky White House. Let's just say this, let's, for a brief moment, give an absurd benefit of the doubt and say this was taken out of context, this was said in jest. What does it say about the environment in the White House right now that that was said and then it was leaked out?
Well, certainly, I mean, people have described it as toxic, and no doubt it appears to be.
Worrisome.
It's entirely worrisome. And listen, on its face, the comment that was made by this young woman, I mean, should prompt a firing. I mean, you know, and unfortunately, you know, to put it in rather blunt and inarticulate terms, you know, the fish rots from the head, as they like to say, and the president has used...
You're really going all Italian here today.
I am pretty much. Well, deep. I'm not going quite that far, because if I did, there'd be, you know, a response
yes,
that's
somebody would be sleeping
worse.
with that
Yes,
fish.
exactly. Yes.
There you go.
You get that vest with the fish in it. But no, listen, this is not only incomprehensible, but unconscionable that someone that would say this, particularly about an individual who, anybody to begin with, but John McCain, who has gone through, you know, untold battles in his life, not the least of which was 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton, the person who refused to leave until his, you know, compatriots were released, you know, could have left because his father was a high commander in the Navy, an admiral, and didn't, chose to stay. He served his country well, admirably, both in the military and in public service. And to make a comment like that, such blatant disregard for his contribution, should be a fireable offense.
So while Ms. Sadler has said it was a joke that fell flat, or that's been reported, would this not be so far out of bounds, even put into context, when the president criticized McCain, saying that, you know, he wasn't a hero because he had been captured?
Right.
What does it say about what does it say about this person, her role in the White House? And like John Kelly or not, the one thing that we always go back to is saying this is a man who devoted his life to the military and our country. He lost his son over it. How this doesn't spark upset and outrage from Secretary Kelly, I don't know.
From Kelly, from any other Republican, this is a colleague of many members of the Senate. Why aren't they complaining about it? But this is also what gets me. She can say it's a joke, and Trump can say it was a joke 2 years ago when he was running. Isn't it the same White House that got triggered by Michelle Wolf 2 weeks ago, who was a comedian? Yeah. You know, they spent a whole week complaining about a comedian. Oh, but somehow their jokes are somehow different. Look, the problem here is they're so disingenuous and so dishonest in the way they choose to communicate with people. I wonder what that phone call was like. Hey, Meghan McCain, I'm sorry I was joking about your dad dying. This is the kind of mistakes that they make in this administration.
More than that, joking that who cares what his view is?
Exactly.
He's irrelevant.
Yes, yes, and what makes me disgusted about this. I don't always agree with the things that John McCain has done, but it's these disingenuous weasels on the right. And I have to say this: when he passes away, they're all going to be fighting over each other to praise him when he was here, and they wouldn't stand up for him when he was being attacked by the president that they're all supporting now. That's what makes this so disgusting.
How are Trump supporters going to manage this, communicate this? We know what we saw on Fox Business yesterday. Someone completely lying about who John McCain was. And I believe Fox has said they won't be bringing that guy back on. But an apology, good people, when someone apologizes, I think for the most part, we accept people's apologies and move forward.
Yeah, well, and it was Charles Payne, the anchor on Fox Business, who gave the apology, not the individual who made the statement. So he apologized on behalf of the network and his role as anchor of the show. Look, I don't understand this level of vitriol. I don't understand, again, if you want to describe it as fake news, creating a characterization of John McCain that is entirely untrue, and then just throwing it out there into the ether. And it has not affected the base in any way, shape, or form, as far as we can tell. They're still with the president. The president's approval numbers are actually up of late. So I don't know how much, you know, the president was probably right during the campaign when he made statements about what he could do on Fifth Avenue and not lose certain supporters. That seems to be accurate.
Well, there's one thing we can do. We don't have to spread the hate or the vitriol. If people decide that they want to open their minds and open their hearts and push that vile dialogue back to the fringe, we have an opportunity to do it, and that's what we're going to do. Coming up, new details.